Every day in England, more than 900 children with special educational needs are missing school because they've been excluded. That's a figure being described by a scandal by a group of MPs.
Yeah, they say that the focus on league tables discriminates against lower ability children, as Breakfast Jane McCubbin reports.
You have to send in all the evidence to what you are claiming.
Just some of the documents from Natasha's legal battle against her son's school. He didn't want to be filmed. He has ADHD and he struggled after changes in his mainstream secondary.
Suddenly they brought in a zero tolerance policy. Zero tolerance policy does not work with children with SEN. He got his first exclusion in year 10 for a very minor incident.
What like?
He actually wore the wrong colour socks to school.
Colourful socks, swinging on his chair, defiant behaviour. Behaviour, the school said, fully justified a series of exclusions, but a tribunal said that behaviour was linked to his disability and he had been discriminated against. The school told us they have since retrained staff and hired an educational psychiatrist.
I think schools can come away from excluding students if things are put into place to support students. If he had had that support, he would have shone.
Today, this report says much more should be done to curb exclusions. They've increased 40% in the last 3 years, but almost half of all of those are pupils with additional needs. That's over 900 SEN kids out of education every single day of the school year. This is in England. In Scotland last year, only one child was permanently excluded. MP Robert Halfon, who led on this report, says this has to change.
At the moment, it is, in my view, discriminatory because the level of it is reached proportions that we could never have imagined. There's a wild west of exclusions going on, and this is wrong. Whether it is due to too much zero tolerance in the classroom, whether it is resource issues, whether it is training issues, whether it is schools off-rolling pupils because they're worried about exam result. Whatever the reasons, it is wrong, and the government have to act and stop this.
Here in Halfon's constituency, over half of all children with SEN go to this one school. At Passmore, they say inclusion is in crisis, with schools judged only by academic standards.
There are so many horror stories about it happening across the country, and it's disproportionate because actually we're rewarded for not being inclusive at the moment. That's the problem.
Off camera, you used a really strong word to me. You used the word fraud.
Yeah. I'm sorry, our funding agreement as an academy with the government says we will serve our whole community. If they're not serving the whole community, they're committing fraud because they're taking money and not doing the job they're being paid to do. And actually, the government needs to grow some teeth around it. Ofsted needs to grow some teeth around it.
The Department for Education told us the number of children being excluded is lower than it was 10 years ago, but they should only ever be used as a last resort. But today's report says they need to start judging schools differently and reward inclusion alongside results. Jane McCubbin, BBC News.
Jane joins us now in the studio. I mean, statistics in that piece are shocking, aren't they? How do we get those down?
Well, there's recommendations in this report, concrete recommendations, such as forcing schools to be more, their words, morally responsible by forcing them to advertise their SEND exclusion rates, by reminding schools of their duties so they tone down these behaviour policies and deal with behaviour issues, but in-house, not by exclusions. But there's also a recommendation here for more research into what they say is a worrying evidence that schools are not identifying children with SEND because of financial pressures, because to do so would be costly. And what happens is that these children end up inevitably spiralling down into exclusion because they can't cope, and that's what's fueling these statistics.
And there's another thing that came out, which is sort of hidden exclusions.
That's right.
And difficult to say how many there are.
Exactly. So these figures we're looking at today could be the tip of the iceberg, because what it talks about, have you heard of off-rolling? Off-rolling is a word we hear more and more about. Schools that don't exclude kids, but do kind of gently encourage parents to take their child out, to home educate. We know those figures are increasing. This report says that schools and local authorities can't wash their hands of these children. They still have they still should have a responsibility for them. Also talks about the kids who are in school but still excluded. Let me just leave you with this. The worst case that Robert Halfon described was a child with SEND who was bereaved. A parent had died. They had gone into meltdown because they couldn't cope and didn't have support. They were being educated in a storeroom at the bottom of a corridor in a school in isolation, working off worksheets. He's called for a Bill of Rights for children, so this type of thing doesn't happen. Will any of this be adopted? Who knows? The Department for Education told us they will look at all of the recommendations, and we'd love to hear what you think about this.